December 20th, 1944, Bastogne, Belgium. The Ardennes forest lay under a shroud of snow and silence, broken only by the dull crump of German artillery hammering the besieged town. Private First Class Ed Shavers, a 22-year-old from Toledo, Ohio, crouched in a foxhole on the Ardennes road, his M1 Garand slick with ice. His hands, wrapped in tattered gloves, trembled not just from the biting cold, but from the weight of 6 days under siege. The 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, had been thrown into Bastogne with no winter gear, no heavy weapons, and barely enough K-rations to keep hunger at bay. Around him, 11,000 paratroopers and glidermen held a perimeter against 50,000 Germans, 5 Panzer divisions, their tracks grinding through the frozen mud, their guns promising obliteration. Shavers had seen friends die in Normandy, their bodies left on Omaha Beach under a sky black with smoke. But this was different. Bastogne was a trap, a noose of steel tightening around a town that was little more than a crossroads on a map. The Germans, emboldened by Hitler's audacious winter offensive, believed they had the Allies cornered. Operation Watch on the Rhine, the Führer's last gamble, aimed to split the Allied armies, seize Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. Bastogne, with its 7 roads radiating like spokes, was the key. Hold it, and you held the Ardennes. Lose it, and the German panzers would roll west, unchecked. In a concrete bunker 3 miles away, Major Heinrich Wagner of the 47th Panzer Corps studied maps under the flicker of a kerosene lamp. His men, veterans of the Eastern Front, had tasted victory before. Kursk, Kharkov, blitz through France in 1940. Wagner's orders were clear: crush Bastogne, annihilate the 101st, and pave the way for the Panzer spearheads. Intelligence reports assured him the Americans were overstretched, their supply lines fraying, their morale cracking under the cold and the weight of encirclement. "They cannot hold," he told his adjutant, Lieutenant Hans Müller, as they reviewed the disposition of the 2nd Panzer Division and the Panzer Lehr. "By Christmas, we'll drink schnapps in Antwerp." On December 22nd, at 11:30 a.m., Wagner's confidence took physical form. 4 figures emerged from the German lines, white flags sagging in the wind. Wagner and Müller, flanked by 2 enlisted men from the 901st Panzer Grenadier Regiment, approached the American perimeter with the swagger of conquerors. Shavers, peering over a splintered log, watched them come. His sergeant, Tom Riley, a grizzled paratrooper who jumped into Sicily with a broken ankle, hissed, "Stay sharp, kid. This smells like a stunt." Riley stepped forward, his Thompson submachine gun slung low, and met the Germans 20 yards out. Müller, his English clipped and precise, unfolded a typed ultimatum from a leather satchel, the Wehrmacht's eagle glaring from the letterhead. "To the American commander in Bastogne," he read, his voice cutting through the snow-laden air, "your forces are surrounded. Your supplies are exhausted. Surrender within 2 hours, or face annihilation. The German army offers honorable terms." Wagner stood silent, his eyes scanning the American lines for weakness, his lips curling into a faint smirk. To him, the 101st were amateurs, airborne troops trained for quick raids, not prolonged sieges. The mathematics were brutal. 11,000 Americans against 50,000 Germans, 45 tanks against 200 panzers, a handful of 105mm howitzers against a wall of 88mm guns. Surrender was logical, inevitable. What Wagner didn't know, what no German commander could have calculated, was that 100 miles to the south, a storm of steel was gathering. In the pre-dawn hours of December 21st, General George S. Patton, the hard-charging commander of the Third Army, had stood in his command post in Nancy, his eyes blazing as he jabbed a map with a gloved finger. "Bastogne will not fall," he growled to his staff. "We're turning north." Now his orders defied every textbook on military logistics. The Third Army, 250,000 men, 133,000 vehicles, including 4,000 tanks, 22,000 jeeps, and 37,000 trucks, was to pivot from the Saar, redirect across 100 miles of icy, rutted roads, and smash through to Bastogne in 48 hours. The numbers were staggering. 1.6 million gallons of gasoline, 3,500 tons of ammunition, 12,000 medics, and 50,000 crates of sea rations, all moving at a pace that mocked German expectations. German intelligence, poring over maps at General Hasso von Manteuffel's headquarters in Dassburg, scoffed at the notion of an American counterstroke. The 5th Panzer Army's war room, a converted schoolhouse lit by dim bulbs, buzzed with the confidence of men who believed they'd outwitted the Allies. Von Manteuffel, a diminutive aristocrat with a strategist's mind, traced the Third Army's positions on a map stained with coffee rings. "Patton's forces are 100 miles south, engaged at the Saar," he told his staff, his voice calm but edged with certainty. "Their supply lines are stretched thin, 400 miles from Normandy's beaches. No army can pivot that fast in winter. The 101st is isolated, and Bastogne will fall within days." His calculations were rooted in German doctrine. An armored division consumed 150,000 gallons of fuel daily on the move, and the Americans, he reasoned, lacked the logistics to sustain such a march through snow-choked roads. What von Manteuffel couldn't fathom was the machine already in motion. In Nancy, Patton's headquarters thrummed with urgency. Staff officers, their eyes bloodshot from 36-hour shifts, relayed orders to field units as teletypes clattered like machine guns. The Third Army's pivot wasn't just a maneuver. It was a logistical miracle, a symphony of steel orchestrated by men who'd learned their craft in the deserts of North Africa and the hedgerows of Normandy. At the heart of it were the truck drivers, 23,000 of them, many black soldiers from segregated units who'd driven the Red Ball Express to keep Patton's tanks fueled since August. Men like Corporal James Carter, a 27-year-old from Birmingham, Alabama, who'd never seen snow before, but now gripped the wheel of a GMC 2.5-ton truck, its canvas top flapping in the blizzard. Carter's convoy, 200 trucks strong, carried 600 tons of ammunition through roads slick with ice, their headlights cutting through the dark like beacons of defiance. The numbers defied comprehension. The Third Army's 133,000 vehicles stretched across 100 miles, a river of steel flowing north at 20 miles per hour. Each truck hauled 5 tons of supplies, ammunition, medical kits, sea rations, blankets, enough to sustain a division for a day. Fuel depots, hastily established at Metz and Verdun, pumped 1.6 million gallons of gasoline, drawn from reserves that dwarfed Germany's entire output. Mechanics worked in open fields, their hands blackened with grease, repairing axles snapped by frozen ruts. Engineers, like Sergeant Maria Gonzalez from Texas, bridged streams with pontoons under German artillery fire, her crew cursing the cold, but never stopping. The Third Army moved not as a single force, but as a living organism, its arteries pulsing with supplies, its heart beating to Patton's relentless tempo. Back in Bastogne, the 101 clung to survival. Private Shavers, his face gaunt under a helmet too big for his shrinking frame, shared a single chocolate bar with his squad, its wrapper torn from a K-ration scavenged from a burned-out Jeep. Across the perimeter, Lieutenant Norman Hayes, a 24-year-old from Iowa, manned a 105mm howitzer with 3 shells left. His crew, frostbitten and hollow-eyed, fired at shadows in the fog, knowing each shot might be their last. In a shelled-out barn, medic Clara Thompson bandaged a paratrooper's leg wound, her fingers slipping on blood-soaked gauze. "Hold on," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant it for him or herself. The 101st's defiance wasn't bravado. It was necessity, forged in the crucible of encirclement, where surrender meant death and retreat meant abandoning brothers. At von Manteuffel's headquarters, reports trickled in by December 23rd, each more alarming than the last. A scout from the 2nd Panzer Division, his face smeared with mud, burst into the war room. "American tanks, sir, moving north, faster than we thought possible." Von Manteuffel dismissed it as exaggeration. "Patton cannot move an army in this weather," he snapped. But doubt crept into his voice, a crack in the armor of German certainty. His intelligence officers, poring over aerial reconnaissance, noted convoys stretching for miles, their headlights a glowing snake winding through the Ardennes. The 5th Panzer Army's war diary, later captured, recorded the shift. American mobility exceeds all projections. Their supply columns operate without pause, defying terrain and winter.
By December 24th, the ground trembled with a new rhythm. From the south, the roar of M4 Sherman engines grew louder, a mechanical thunder that drowned out German artillery. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding Combat Command B of the 4th Armored Division, led the charge toward Assenois, a village 5 miles from Bastogne. Abrams, a stocky tanker with a cigar clamped between his teeth, rode in his Sherman, nicknamed Thunderbolt, its 75mm gun primed. His column, 50 tanks, 20 half-tracks, and 100 trucks, smashed through German pickets, their .50 caliber machine guns chewing through Panzer grenadiers. Behind them came the supply trains, jeeps loaded with plasma, trucks groaning under crates of .30-06 rounds, ambulances carrying surgeons who hadn't slept in days. The road to Bastogne, a muddy quagmire, became a lifeline, its ruts carved by American resolve. Inside Bastogne, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe received Wagner's ultimatum in his basement command post, a damp hole lit by flickering lanterns. His staff, their faces etched with hunger, watched as he read the German demand. McAuliffe, a wiry artilleryman with a penchant for bluntness, snorted. "Surrender? Nuts." He scrawled the word on a scrap of paper, handed it to an aide, and sent it back to the Germans. Muller, translating for Wagner, stumbled over the slang, his brow furrowing. "Nuts?" Wagner spat, his face reddening as if slapped. The reply wasn't just defiance, it was a rejection of German logic, a declaration that the 101st would rather die than yield. Wagner stormed back to his lines, vowing to bury Bastogne in fire. But fire couldn't stop what was coming. On December 26th, at 4:50 p.m., Abrams's Shermans broke through at Assenois, their turrets draped with frost, their tracks churning snow into mud. The 101st, down to their last clips, saw the lead tank roll into Bastogne, its hull painted with the words, "We're here." Paratroopers, their lips cracked from cold, swarmed the convoy, tearing open crates of sea rations, passing out blankets, and reloading M1s with fresh ammo. Medics like Clara Thompson worked through the night, their breath steaming as they saved men who'd been given up for dead. Hot coffee, poured from thermoses, tasted like salvation to shavers, who clutched a steaming mug as if it were life itself. Wagner, watching from a ridge, saw his offensive collapse. His Panthers, low on fuel and bogged in mud, were no match for the American tide. The 47th Panzer Corps' war diary, later seized, recorded his disbelief. The American relief arrived with impossible speed. Their logistics defy all doctrine. The Third Army delivered 50 tons of supplies per hour, turning a surrounded outpost into a fortress. By January 1945, the Bulge was crumbling, costing Germany 100,000 men, 800 tanks, and their last hope of victory. Von Manteuffel, retreating through the snow, wrote in his final report, "We underestimated their abundance. Their trucks were their true weapon." For Private Shavers, the sight of Abrams' tanks was more than relief. It was a revelation. He'd heard Wagner's taunt, felt the weight of encirclement, seen men die in foxholes they'd carved with bayonets. But now, as he chewed a canned peach from a supply crate, he understood. The Germans had bet on scarcity, on breaking the 101st's will. They hadn't counted on America's factories, which churned out 133,000 vehicles and 1.6 million gallons of fuel. They hadn't counted on drivers like Corporal Carter, who drove 36 hours straight, his truck's tires skidding on ice. They hadn't counted on engineers like Sergeant Gonzalez, who bridged rivers under fire. The relief of Bastogne wasn't just a victory, it was a lesson written in steel and snow. The Germans taunted the 101st, believing encirclement meant defeat. Instead, they faced a truth their war machine couldn't grasp. In modern war, industrial might reigns supreme. The Third Army's 48-hour sprint, powered by Detroit's assembly lines and the sweat of men and women who never fired a shot, turned a taunt into a rout. The Ardennes, meant to be Hitler's triumph, became his graveyard. Wagner's ultimatum, once a symbol of German arrogance, was now a footnote buried under the tracks of 133,000 vehicles that carried democracy to Bastogne and beyond.